I bought the beach house specifically because the town was boring. A quiet, salt-sprayed sanctuary far from the blast radius of my family's constant chaos. At 33, I finally held the keys to silence. Then my sister Paige called. She didn't ask to visit. She announced she was bringing 12 friends for a low-key weekend, speaking as if my mortgage was actually our shared stage. In that single breath, I felt my sanctuary turning into a crime scene. The key felt heavy in my palm, a jagged piece of brass that weighed more than its physical mass suggested. It weighed exactly $340,000, which was every cent of savings I had managed to scrape together over a decade of missed vacations, packed lunches, and corporate bonuses I had banked rather than burned. I stood on the porch of the cottage, staring at the front door. The paint was appealing, sun-bleached gray that matched the overcast sky above Driftwood Cove. To anyone else, this house probably looked like a fixer-upper, a sad little box sitting too close to the dunes and too far from the highway. To me, it looked like oxygen. I turned the key in the lock. The tumblers clicked with a satisfying, mechanical finality. I pushed the door open and stepped into the smell of stale cedar and salt air. Silence. It was a thick, beautiful silence. No sirens, no conference calls, and most importantly, no family screaming matches echoing off the walls. I had chosen Driftwood Cove specifically because it was boring. It was the kind of town that rolled up its sidewalks at 7 in the evening. There were no trendy wine bars, no Instagram-famous murals, and no nightlife scene to attract the kind of chaos that had followed my last name for as long as I could remember. It was sleepy. It was dull. It was perfect. I dropped my bag on the floorboards, the sound echoing in the empty living room. I was 33 years old, and this was the first thing I had ever owned that was purely mine, not shared with a boyfriend, not co-signed by a parent, and not borrowed by my younger sister, Paige. I walked to the kitchen, running my hand along the laminate countertop. It was peeling at the corner. I did not care. I looked out the window at the dunes, where the sea oats whipped back and forth in the stiff wind. I felt a sudden, sharp pang in my chest, a mix of pride and a terrifying, cold suspicion that I had done something incredibly selfish. The guilt was a reflex. In the Patterson family, doing something for yourself was generally interpreted as an act of aggression against the collective dysfunction. If you had money, you shared it. If you had space, you offered it. If you had sanity, you donated it to whoever was currently losing theirs. I pulled my phone from my pocket and set it on the counter, staring at the black screen. I had made a promise to myself during the 3-hour drive from the city. I called them my peace rules. Rule 1, no unannounced visitors. Rule 2, no family gets a key, not mom, and definitely not Paige. Rule 3, no social media geotags. This house did not exist on the internet. It was a black hole for data. It was a reset button for my nervous system. I took a deep breath, trying to inhale the reality of my new life. I'm going to paint this kitchen yellow. I thought, I am going to drink coffee in silence. I am going to read books without headphones. My phone buzzed against the laminate, the vibration sounding like a drill in the quiet room. I looked down. The name on the screen made my stomach drop. Paige. I stared at it. It was too soon. I had not even unpacked a single box. I had only closed on the house 48 hours ago. I debated letting it go to voicemail, but I knew the drill. If I did not answer, she would call back. Then she would text. Then she would call Mom, crying that I was dead in a ditch or ignoring her. And then Mom would call me in a panic, and my first night of peace would be spent managing 2 hysterical women from 300 miles away. I slid my thumb across the screen. Hello? Paige? I said, keeping my voice steady. Audrey! Her voice was a sugar crash screech, high-pitched and vibrating with an energy that usually meant she wanted something expensive. Oh my God, tell me you are at the beach house. Tell me you are soaking up the vibes right now. I am just walking in the door. Paige, I said, I am holding a box of cleaning supplies. I knew it, she squealed. Listen, Do not unpack too much. I have the best news. I was talking to the girls, and we all agreed that you have been working way too hard. Like, dangerously hard. You are always the responsible one. Audrey, it is honestly inspiring, but you need to let your hair down. My grip tightened on the counter. I knew this cadence. It was the wind-up before the pitch. So, here is the plan, she continued, not letting me speak. I am coming up there. But not just me, because that would be boring, right? I am bringing the squad. It is going to be a super low-key girls' weekend. Just wine, sunsets, and sister bonding. I already rented a van. I closed my eyes. How many? I asked. What? How many people? Paige? Oh, just a few. 12, maybe 13 if Chloe brings her dog. But the dog is hypoallergenic, so do not freak out. We will be there Friday. Friday was 2 days away. 12 people. In a 2-bedroom cottage with 1 bathroom and a septic tank that the inspector had described as temperamental. No, I said. The silence on the other end was heavy. It was the shock of a person who has never been told no in a language she understood. What do you mean? No, she asked, her voice dropping an octave, losing the syrupy coating. I mean no. Paige, I said, leaning against the counter for support. I just bought the place. There is no furniture. The water heater barely works. I am here to paint and fix things, not host a bachelorette party. It is not a party. Audrey, it is a retreat, and we do not need furniture. We are bringing air mattresses. We are low maintenance. You know us. I did know them. That was the problem. Paige's friends were a roving band of chaos agents who treated physical spaces like backdrops for their digital lives. They broke things and laughed about it. They spilled red wine on carpets and called it a memory. I cannot have 12 people here, I said, trying to keep the apology out of my voice. The answer is no. Audrey, seriously? You are going to be like this? After everything I've been going through with Jason? I need this. I need to get away. You have this whole house all to yourself, and you are going to hoard it? That is so... The guilt hit me right on schedule. It was a physical ache in my solar plexus. I thought about Paige's recent breakup, her debt, her constant state of flailing crisis. I was the big sister. I was the safety net. That was the role. I tried to find the middle ground. I tried to bargain for my sanity. Look, I said, not this weekend, and not 12 people. Give me a month to get the place set up. Then you can come up. You, by yourself, or maybe bring one friend. We can have a nice dinner. But I cannot do a crowd. Not now. There was a pause. I could hear her breathing on the other line. I thought, for a second, that I had won, that I had been reasonable and she had accepted it. You are being so dramatic, she said, her voice light and airy again, totally dismissing my refusal. We will figure it out. It will be fine. You worry too much. That is your problem. Audrey, you never just let magic happen. I am not worrying. Paige, I am telling you. Love you, she shouted, and the line went dead. I stared at the phone. She had not heard me. Or rather, she had heard me, categorized my objection as noise, and decided to proceed anyway. It was a crack in the wall I had just built. I felt a sudden urge to throw the phone into the ocean, but I settled for sliding it into my back pocket and walking out the front door to get my boxes from the car. The air outside was cooling as the afternoon wore on. I dragged a heavy box of kitchenware up the gravel path. Beautiful day for a move-in. A voice called out. I looked up. A woman was standing on the other side of the waist-high picket fence that separated my yard from the neighbors. She looked to be in her 60s, wearing an oversized gardening hat and clutching a pair of shears. Her face was weathered and kind, with sharp, intelligent eyes. Hi, I said, setting the box down on the porch steps. Yes, it is. I am Audrey, Margot Lyle, she said, waving the shears. Welcome to the neighborhood. We were wondering when someone would buy the Miller place. It has been sitting empty for 6 months. Thank you, I said. I am really looking forward to the quiet. Margot laughed, a dry, raspy sound. Well, you picked the right street. Mostly retirees and fishermen on this block. We go to bed with the sun. That sounds like heaven. I said. She hesitated, looking at my house with a curious expression. She tilted her head, studying the windows. Just a heads up, she said, her tone dropping slightly. We have had some issues with the short-term rental people down on the south end of town. Noise, trash, parking on the lawns. The town council is cracking down. But you know how it is. I nodded, feeling a prickle of defensiveness. Oh, I am not renting it out, I said quickly. I intend to live here. Well, part-time for now, but eventually full-time. It is just for me. Margot's face relaxed. She smiled, and it looked genuine this time. Oh, that is wonderful news. Real neighbors. That is what we need more of. You hear stories, you know? Investors buying up these little places, packing 20 kids in for a weekend. They treat the houses like disposable cups. It changes the feeling of the street. I promised myself I would never do that, I said, and I meant it. Good, Margot said. If you need anything, I am right next door. I make excellent plum jam, and I have too much of it. I thanked her and carried the box inside, but her words stuck to me like burrs. Short-term rental people. The phrase made me uneasy. It was exactly what Paige was threatening to turn my home into, a crash pad for a weekend bender. I spent the next hour unpacking the basics, sheets on the mattress, towels in the bathroom. I scrubbed the toilet and wiped down the shelves. It was mundane work, but it felt holy. This was my dirt to clean. Around 5 o'clock, my phone pinged with an email notification. I sat on the floor of the living room, leaning back against the wall, and opened it. The subject line read, "Welcome partner host. Your onboarding is complete." I frowned. I did not recognize the sender. Saltline Key Management. I opened the email, assuming it was spam. Probably some algorithm that scraped public property records and sent generic pitches to new homeowners. Dear Audrey, welcome to the Saltline family. We are thrilled to partner with you on your new property at 44 Turn Lane. Your listing is live and looks fantastic. We have scheduled your initial linen service for Friday, October 14th, in preparation for your first check-in. Please review the attached guest turnover schedule and confirm your banking details for the direct deposit of your rental income. Sincerely, the Saltline team. My heart did a strange, stuttering double beat. I read it again. It had my name, it had the correct address, and it had the date. Friday, October 14th. That was 2 days away. That was when Paige said she was coming. I felt a cold flush of adrenaline. This had to be a scam. A sophisticated phishing attempt. I looked at the logo, a stylized blue wave that looked professional, not like a clip art job. I typed a reply, my fingers shaking slightly. There must be a mistake. I did not hire a management company. I am not renting my house. Please remove my information immediately. I hit send and stared at the screen, waiting for a bounce back or a bot reply. Nothing happened. I stood up and paced the small living room. It was a coincidence. It had to be. Paige had mentioned a girls' weekend, not a rental. She was my sister. She could be thoughtless. She could be manipulative. But she wouldn't list my house with a property manager without telling me. That was insane. That was fraud. My phone chimed again. A text message this time. From Paige. It was an image. I opened it and felt the air leave my lungs. It was a digital collage, a mood board. In the center was a photo of my living room. Not the empty room I was standing in, but a staged version of it. It was the photo from the real estate listing, the one the sellers had taken before they moved out, but it had been altered. The lighting was brighter, the colors saturated. Someone had digitally added a trendy rattan chair and a neon sign on the wall that said, "Good vibes only." Underneath the photo, Paige had written, "Do not worry, we will keep it classy. I promise it will look exactly like the vision." I stared at the photo. She had the listing pictures. She had saved them. I dialed her number. It went straight to voicemail. "Paige," I said, and my voice was shaking. "I just got a weird email from a company called Saltline, and you are sending me photos of my house that look like a hotel brochure. What is going on?" Call me back. Now. I hung up and threw the phone onto the couch. The silence of the house didn't feel peaceful anymore. It felt heavy, like the air before a thunderstorm. I needed to get out. I needed to do something physical. I checked my list. I still needed to buy a new deadbolt. I hadn't changed the locks yet, just wiped them down, and some basic tools. I grabbed my keys and drove into town. Driftwood Cove's town center was 3 blocks of weathered brick buildings and a fishing pier. I found the hardware store, a cluttered place that smelled of sawdust and oil. I walked to the back, looking for the lock sets. I grabbed a heavy-duty deadbolt and a few screwdrivers. As I was walking to the register, a man in work boots and a Carhartt vest stepped out of an aisle and almost collided with me. "Oh, excuse me," he said. He was young, maybe my age, with dust in his beard and a pencil tucked behind his ear. He looked at me, then looked at the deadbolt in my hand, and then looked at me again with a flash of recognition. "Wait," he said. "You are the lady from Turn Lane, right? Number 44? I froze. "Yes," I said, gripping the plastic packaging of the lock. "Why?" He smiled, wiping his hand on his jeans before offering it. "Eli Mercer. I am the contractor. I got your request for the quote." "My request?" "Yeah," he said. "For the emergency repairs, the storm shutters and the deck reinforcement. I swung by yesterday to take a look at the exterior, but everything looked pretty solid to me. I was going to email you the estimate tonight, but since you are here, I felt like I was moving through water." "I did not ask for a quote," I said slowly. Eli's smile faltered. "You didn't?" "No, I just bought the house on Monday. I haven't called anyone." He frowned, pulling a folded piece of paper from his back pocket. "That is weird. I got a text on Tuesday, said it was urgent, needed a safety assessment for insurance purposes before the weekend." He unfolded the paper and showed me. It was a printout of a text conversation. "Hi, Eli. This is the owner of 44 Turn Lane. We need a rush quote on storm vulnerability repairs. Please assess ASAP." Trying to get everything secure for guests arriving Friday, I looked at the number at the top of the page. It was not my number. It was not Paige's number. It was a local area code I didn't recognize. "Who sent this?" I asked. "I don't know," Eli said, looking concerned now. "I just assumed it was you." The name on the text profile was Saltline Ops. Saltline again. My stomach turned over. Someone was impersonating me. Someone was ordering contractors to my house. I stared at Eli. "I did not send this," I said, "and nobody should be at my house." Eli looked at me carefully. He saw the panic in my eyes. "Look," he said, his voice dropping. "If you didn't order this, you might want to check the property. When I went by yesterday to look at the deck, the side gate was unlatched. I thought maybe a cleaner had left it open, unlatched." I thanked him, paid for the locks with hands that were trembling so hard I dropped my credit card twice, and ran back to my car. I drove back to the house too fast. My heart was hammering against my ribs. The quiet sanctuary I had bought was dissolving, replaced by the paranoid feeling of being watched. I pulled into the gravel driveway. The house looked the same. The windows were dark. The sea oats were still whipping in the wind. I got out of the car and walked around the side of the house, toward the outdoor shower. It was a wooden enclosure near the back deck, meant for rinsing off sand. I remembered the email. "Welcome, partner host." I remembered the text Eli showed me. "Guests arriving Friday." If this was a rental scheme, if someone was treating my house like a hotel, they would need a way for people to get in. I walked to the outdoor shower. The wooden slats were gray and weathered. There was a rubber mat on the floor, covered in sand. I stood there for a moment, listening to the ocean roar. I didn't want to look. If I looked, and I found something, it made it real. It meant my sister wasn't just annoying. She was dangerous. It meant my boundaries were already gone. I knelt down. I lifted the corner of the heavy black rubber mat. There, glinting in the fading light, was a key. It was shiny, brand new, a copy. I picked it up. It was cold. I had not put a key here. I had the only 2 keys the realtor gave me in my purse. This was a 3rd key. I stood up, clutching the piece of metal so tight it dug into my skin. Someone had been here. Someone had copied my key and hidden it for the guests. Paige. It had to be Paige. But how? She lived 3 states away. She hadn't been here, unless she wasn't working alone. I walked to the front door, my movements jerky and stiff with rage. I went inside and locked the door behind me. I threw the spare key onto the kitchen counter. It skittered across the laminate and hit the backsplash with a metallic clink. I did not unpack any more boxes. I did not paint the kitchen yellow. I spent the next 2 hours with a screwdriver in my hand, furiously dismantling the front door lock. I stripped out the old hardware and installed the new deadbolt I had bought. I drove the screws in with a violence that surprised me. When the new lock was in, I didn't stop. I opened the box for the Ring doorbell camera I had bought on a whim. I mounted it to the doorframe, syncing it to my phone, watching the little blue light spin as it connected to the Wi-Fi. I wanted eyes. I wanted proof. By the time I was finished, it was dark outside. The ocean was just a black void beyond the dunes. I sat on the floor in the living room, my back against the door I had just fortified. I was exhausted. I was hungry. I was scared. My phone buzzed again. I looked at it. It was Paige. She hadn't called back. She hadn't answered my question about the email. Instead, she had sent a countdown clock. It was a generic Instagram sticker of a champagne bottle popping, overlaid on a black background. T-minus 36 hours, the caption read. Pack your bags. Ladies, Driftwood Cove is waiting for us. She was ignoring the no. She was acting like the conversation never happened. She was coming, and she was bringing an army. I looked at the spare key on the counter. I looked at the dark windows. I typed a text to Paige. Do not come. I changed the locks. I hovered my thumb over the send button. Then I deleted it. If I warned her, she would just argue. She would gaslight me. She would tell me I was crazy. Let her come. I thought, a hard, cold knot forming in my chest. Let her drive all the way here with her 12 friends and her air mattresses. Let her find the door locked. But as I sat there in the dark, watching the camera feed on my phone, I knew it wouldn't be that simple. The email from Saltline had my closing date. Eli had a text from an unknown number. This wasn't just Paige being a brat. This was a machine, and I was standing right in the gears. I wrapped a blanket around my shoulders and stared at the door, waiting for the camera to catch movement in the dark. The silence of Driftwood Cove pressed in against the glass, heavy and full of secrets. My sanctuary was already gone. Now, I just had to survive the invasion. Thursday afternoon was supposed to be for the baseboards. I had bought a gallon of semi-gloss white paint and a high-quality angled brush, and I had spent the morning taping off the edges of the living room with the kind of meditative focus that usually costs $300 an hour in therapy. The house was quiet. The ocean was a low, rhythmic thrumming in the distance. I was covered in dust, wearing sweatpants that had lost their elasticity in 2019, and I was happy. At 2 o'clock, the piece didn't just break, it was run over. I heard the engine first, a diesel rumble that vibrated the loose window panes I hadn't fixed yet. Then came the crunch of tires on gravel, loud and heavy, followed by the hiss of air brakes. I stood up, wiping my hands on a rag, and looked out the front window. A massive Sprinter van, jet black with tinted windows, was backing into my narrow driveway. It was taking up the entire space, its rear bumper crushing the hydrangeas I had watered that morning. Behind it, a sleek white SUV pulled onto the grass, my grass, and parked at a jagged angle. My heart hammered a warning code against my ribs. I knew, with a sinking, nauseating certainty, who was inside. I walked to the front door, unlocked the new deadbolt I had installed only the night before, and stepped onto the porch. The side door of the van slid open with a mechanical whir. Music blasted out, something bass-heavy and aggressive. Then, a scream. Driftwood Cove. Baby. It was Paige. She leaped out of the van like she was bursting from a cake, arms thrown wide, wearing a white linen jumpsuit and oversized sunglasses. She looked expensive. She looked manic, and she was 24 hours early. Behind her, a clown car of humanity began to unload. women in matching oversized straw hats, men carrying cases of equipment, and girls holding phones up to their faces, documenting the gravel, the sky, the peeling paint of my porch. "Paige!" I shouted, stepping down the stairs. She saw me. Her face didn't register surprise or guilt. Instead, she beamed, a high-wattage smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Audrey!" she shrieked. She ran toward me, ignoring the fact that I was stiff with rage, and threw her arms around my neck. "You are here. Oh my God. Look at you. You look so authentic." She smelled of coconut sunscreen and champagne. I tried to pull away, but she held on, turning us both toward the van where a girl was already filming. "Say hi to the squad, Aud." Paige chirped, squeezing my shoulder. "Best big sister in the world. She literally saved my life this weekend." I pulled away. Hard. The camera followed me. "Paige," I said, keeping my voice low but lethal. "What are you doing here? You said Friday, and you said friends. Who are these people?" I gestured to the driveway. There were at least 12 people. 2 men were unloading heavy black cases that looked like lighting rigs. Another man, wearing all black and holding a clipboard, was directing traffic, pointing at my front door like he owned the deed. "Surprise!" Paige laughed, but her eyes darted to the man with the clipboard. We beat the traffic, and honestly, we needed to set up for the lighting. You know how the coastal golden hour is. It is fleeting. "Set up?" I repeated. "Paige, this is not a set. This is my house. I told you no." "Audrey, stop," she hissed, her smile freezing in place. "Do not embarrass me. This is huge." Before I could respond, the man with the clipboard walked up the steps. He was 30-ish, with a sharp jawline and the dead-eyed efficiency of someone who managed logistics for people who didn't understand the word no. "Audrey Patterson?" he asked. He didn't offer a hand. He just checked something off his list. "Yes," I said. "Who are you?" "Grant," he said. "Brand operations. We are excited to be working with you. The location has great bones, but we are going to need to clear the living room. The aesthetic is a little cluttered for the campaign." He signaled to 2 of the guys carrying cases. "Clear the floor," he said. "Staging in 10. "Excuse me?" I stepped in front of the door, blocking the path. "You are not clearing anything. You are not coming inside. This is private property." Grant looked at me with mild irritation, like I was a slow waiter. "It is a contracted location." "Ma'am," he said, "we have the load-in scheduled for 1400 hours. We are actually running 5 minutes behind." I looked at Paige. She was busy directing a girl with blonde extensions on where to put a cooler, avoiding my gaze. "Paige," I said loud enough to cut through the music. "Get over here." She flinched, then pasted the smile back on and trotted over. "What is it?" she asked, playing innocent. "Audrey, you are being so intense. He says this is a contracted location," I said, pointing at Grant. "What is he talking about?" Paige laughed, a nervous, tinkling sound. "Oh, Grant takes everything so seriously. It is just a little collab. I told you, a brand wanted to sponsor the girls' weekend. It is basically free money. Audrey, they just need a few shots of us enjoying the space. It is a soft launch for a new seltzer or lifestyle app or something. I do not know the details. It is a lifestyle campaign for Salt Line Coastal," Grant corrected, stepping forward. "And the contract is clear. Full access to the ground floor and exterior for 48 hours. He flipped a page on his clipboard and held it out to me. I looked at the document. It was a location release form. It had the address, 44 Turn Lane. It had the dates, and at the bottom, typed neatly in the signature box, was my name, Audrey Patterson. There was no signature, just a small digital checkbox marked approved. I did not sign this, I said, my voice shaking. Grant shrugged. It was submitted through the partner portal. Digital acceptance is binding. I looked at Paige. She was biting her lip, her eyes wide and pleading. "You forged my approval?" I asked. "I did not forge anything," she whispered furiously, leaning in close so Grant wouldn't hear. I just clicked the box. It is a formality. Audrey, please, do not make a scene. These people are professionals. If I mess this up, I look like an amateur. You are an amateur. Paige, I said, this is my home. You cannot just sell it to a company for the weekend. I am not selling it. I am maximizing it, she snapped. God, why do you have to be so heavy about everything? I am trying to build something here. I am trying to launch my brand. Can you just support me for once instead of acting like a landlord? She pushed past me, grabbing a throw pillow from the porch swing. Okay, everyone, she shouted to the group. Let's get the vibe right. Champagne in the kitchen in 5. The group cheered. They surged forward, a tide of linen and laughter. I stood there, stunned. I was physically blocking the door, but they just flowed around me. One girl smiled and said, "Cute top," as she squeezed past, carrying a massive bag of ice. A guy with a camera bumped my shoulder and didn't even apologize. Just kept checking his light meter. I was a ghost in my own house. I turned around and followed them inside. The transformation was instant and violent. My carefully placed boxes were shoved into a corner. The drop cloths I had laid down were kicked aside. Grant was standing in the center of the room, pointing at my old armchair. The one comfortable thing I owned. "Lose it," he said. "It does not fit the pallet." 2 guys grabbed the chair. "Put that down," I shouted. The room went quiet. The music from the portable speaker outside was still thumping. But inside, 12 faces turned to look at me. I stood in the middle of the living room, my hands balled into fists. "Everyone out," I said. "Now. This is not a location. This is my house. I did not sign a contract. I did not agree to this. Get your stuff and get out." Paige's face crumbled for a split second. I saw real terror there, a flash of eyes widening, a tremor in her chin. It was the look of a child who had broken a vase and was waiting for the smack. But then, just as quickly, the fear hardened into something ugly. She stepped forward, her chin jutting out. "You are embarrassing yourself," she said, her voice hard. "You are screaming at my friends. You are acting crazy." "I am acting like a homeowner who has been invaded." I said, "You are acting like a jealous, bitter spinster." Paige spat out. The words hung in the air, nasty and sharp. "You finally get a nice place. And you cannot handle that I have friends to fill it. You want everyone to be as miserable and lonely as you are." The cruelty of it took my breath away. It was a heat-seeking missile aimed at my deepest insecurity, that I had bought this house to hide from the world because I didn't know how to live in it. "We are not leaving," Paige announced, turning her back to me. "Grant, keep setting up. She is just tired. She gets like this." Grant nodded, dismissively. "Clear the chair," he repeated. I felt tears prickling my eyes. Tears of rage, not sadness. I reached for my phone. "I am calling the police," I said. Paige spun around. "You wouldn't. Watch me." I dialed the non-emergency line, my fingers trembling. I walked out to the porch to get away from the noise. As I waited for the dispatcher, I saw Margot Lyle coming out of her house next door. She was wearing her gardening hat, but she wasn't smiling. She walked toward the fence, looking at the black Sprinter van that was blocking half of her driveway. "Audrey?" she called out. I lowered the phone. "I am so sorry." "Margot," I said, "I am handling it. They are leaving." Margot looked at the chaos on my lawn, the equipment cases, the people vaping on the grass, the sheer volume of intrusion. "It is a bit much." "Dear," she said, "I can't get my Buick out. And the music. I know. I am on the phone with the police right now." Just then, Paige burst out the front door. She had spotted Margot. A switch flipped. Paige's face smoothed into a mask of delight. She trotted down the steps, waving. "Hi, you must be the neighbor. I am Paige, Audrey's sister." Margot blinked, taken aback by the sudden energy. "Oh, hello. I was just telling Audrey, I love your hat." Paige interrupted. "It is so coastal." Grandmother chic. "Listen, we are just capturing some content for a few hours. We love the authentic vibe of the street. Actually," Paige paused. looking at Margot's driveway. Then she looked at Margot with a dazzling, expectant smile. "Could you do us a huge favor? Your car is kind of in the background of our establishing shot. It is a little too modern. If you could just move it down the block for like an hour, that would be amazing." Margot's mouth opened slightly. She looked at Paige, then at me. "Excuse me?" Margot said, her tone icing over. Paige kept smiling, oblivious to the temperature drop. "Just move it down the street? We want the shot to look timeless, you know?" "Paige, stop," I snapped. "Margot, do not move your car." Margot looked at me with pity. "I will give you an hour." "Audrey," she said quietly, "then I am calling the town code enforcement officer. We have rules about commercial filming in residential zones." She turned and walked back into her house, slamming the door. Paige rolled her eyes. "Wow, boomer energy much? She is totally killing the vibe." I lifted the phone back to my ear. The dispatcher had finally picked up. "Driftwood Cove Police, non-emergency. I need to report a trespass," I said, staring at my sister. "I have 12 people in my home who refuse to leave." "Are you the homeowner?" the dispatcher asked. "Yes. Do you know the people?" "One is my sister. The rest are strangers." "Is there a weapon involved?" "No." "Is there violence?" "No. But they are refusing to leave. They are moving my furniture. They are filming." "Ma'am," the dispatcher sighed, "if you invited your sister, and she brought guests, this sounds like a civil dispute. We cannot forcibly remove family members unless there is a protective order or a crime in progress. She did not have permission to bring them." I said, my voice rising. "I told her no." "Did you give her a key?" "No. But she got in." "Okay. If there is no forced entry and no violence, we can send a unit to mediate, but we cannot kick them out if they claim to have a right to be there." "You said something about filming?" "Yes. They claim they have a contract. I didn't sign it. That is definitely a civil matter." "Ma'am, contract disputes go through the courts. An officer can come out and take a report. But that is about it." I hung up. The phone felt like a dead weight. A civil matter. I walked back inside. The living room was unrecognizable. They had draped white sheets over my couch to make it look beachy. They had set up a ring light in the kitchen. Grant was talking to the photographer. "We need the light to hit the label. Make sure the ocean is in the bouquet." I took a deep breath. I walked to the center of the room. I held up my phone and opened the camera app. I hit record. "I am Audrey Patterson," I said loudly, my voice echoing off the hardwood. "I am the sole owner of this property. I am stating for the record that no one in this room has my permission to be here. You are all trespassing. If you do not leave immediately, I will be filing lawsuits against every single one of you and the brands you represent." The room went quiet again. The photographer lowered his camera. A few of the girls looked at each other, uneasy. Then, 3 phones went up. Paige's friends were recording me. One girl with pink hair zoomed in on my face. POV. The Karen homeowner having a meltdown. She narrated to her screen, making a sad face. Paige stepped into the frame, putting a hand on her chest. "Guys, I am so sorry," she said to her phone, ignoring me. "My sister is going through a really hard time mentally. We are trying to be supportive. But she is just spiraling." She looked at me with performative concern. "Audrey, put the phone down. You are scaring people." I lowered the phone, shaking with adrenaline. "This isn't content. Paige, this is my life. Get out." Grant stepped forward. He didn't look scared. He looked bored. "Ms. Patterson," he said, "if you force a cancellation now, you will be in breach of contract. The cancellation fee is $5,000, plus production costs." I laughed. A harsh, jagged sound. "I didn't sign a contract." "Actually," Grant said, tapping his clipboard, "the property is listed under an LLC. Saltline Coastal Experiences. The onboarding was submitted 3 months ago. By the authorized representative." He looked at Paige. I froze. 3 months ago? I hadn't even bought the house 3 months ago. I was still in escrow. I turned to Paige. She was studying her fingernails, refusing to meet my eyes. "Paige," I said. How could you submit onboarding 3 months ago? I didn't own the house yet. She shrugged. A jerky, defensive motion. I knew you were going to get it. You always get what you want. I just prepared. You listed my house before I owned it? It is called manifesting, she shouted. And it worked, didn't it? The brand signed. The money is there. What money? I asked. She didn't answer. She turned away. Grant cleared his throat. The first installment was paid upon approval. To the account on file. I looked at Paige's back. She was trembling. We are not leaving, Grant said calmly. We have a schedule. Unless you want to explain to Saltline why their campaign is dead and pay the damages yourself. I looked around the room. 12 strangers. A contract I hadn't signed but that somehow bound me. A sister who had sold me out before the ink was dry on the deed. I walked out of the room. I couldn't breathe in there. I went into the kitchen. I needed water. I needed a weapon. I needed to wake up. I heard footsteps behind me. It was Paige. She was on her phone, pacing near the pantry. She didn't see me standing by the refrigerator. Please, Graham, she whispered. Her voice was unrecognizable, small, terrified, stripped of all the influencer bravado. I am handling her. She is freaking out, but I am handling it. Just do not come here, okay? I will get the shots. I promise. She paused, listening. I know, she whispered. I know what I owe. Just get me through tonight, and I will have the money. Please. She hung up and leaned her forehead against the pantry door. She took a shuddering breath. I stepped out from behind the fridge. Who is Graham? I asked. Paige jumped about a foot in the air. She spun around, her eyes wide. Nobody, she said too quickly. Just a producer. For the shoot. You owe him money? No. It is just business. Production costs. Paige, I said, stepping closer. You are scared. Why are you scared? I am not scared. I am stressed. Because you are trying to ruin everything. She pushed past me, grabbing a bottle of wine from the counter. Just stay in your room. Audrey, she said over her shoulder. If you can't be cool, just be invisible. She marched back into the living room. Here is to the weekend. I heard her shout, her voice bright and fake again. I stood in the kitchen, listening to the cheers. They weren't leaving. They knew I couldn't physically force them out. And they knew the police wouldn't touch it. I was a hostage in my own home. I walked down the hall to my bedroom. I went inside and locked the door. Then I wedged a chair under the handle. I sat on the bed, listening to the bass thumping through the floorboards. I could hear laughter. I could hear the clink of glass. I could hear Grant barking orders about lighting. It was 9 o'clock at night. My sanctuary was a nightclub. I pulled up the Ring camera app on my phone. I needed to see what was happening outside. The feed was grainy in the dark. I could see the van. I could see Margot's house, dark and silent. Then, I saw movement. A figure was walking along the side of the house, not one of the party guests. This person was wearing a dark hoodie and moving with a slow, deliberate stealth. They walked up to the side gate, the one that led to the backyard and the outdoor shower. I watched as the figure reached out a gloved hand and tested the latch. It rattled. The figure paused, looking up at the house. They didn't look like they were looking for a party. They looked like they were checking the perimeter. They pulled a phone out, typed something, and then walked away, disappearing into the dunes. I shivered. Just get me through tonight. Paige had said, I realized then that the party wasn't the problem. The party was the cover. Someone else was watching the house. And they weren't waiting for a champagne toast. They were waiting for a payment. The sun came up over Driftwood Cove like a bruise, purple and swollen behind the heavy cloud cover. I had not slept. I had spent the night sitting in a wooden chair wedged against my bedroom door, listening to the bass vibrating through the floorboards until 3 a.m. When the house finally fell silent, it was the silence of exhaustion, not peace. I opened my bedroom door at 7 o'clock. The hallway smelled of stale champagne, expensive perfume, and something chemical, like hairspray mixed with ozone. I walked into the living room, bracing myself for the mess. But what I found was more disturbing than red wine stains or crushed cans. The room had been curated. The furniture I had fought to keep in place was gone. Pushed into the garage or stacked in the hallway. In its place were sleek, white beanbag chairs that I had never seen before. A neon sign was mounted on the wall where my grandmother's oil painting used to hang. It buzzed with a low electric hum, spelling out "Salt Line State of Mind" in bright turquoise script. I walked to the kitchen, on the island. Arranged in a perfect pyramid were stacks of plush white towels. Each one was embroidered with a logo, a stylized wave inside a hexagon. Beside them were branded water bottles, tote bags, and small boxes of sea salt soaps. This was not a hangover from a wild party. This was inventory. I touched one of the towels. It was high quality, thick and soft. This wasn't something Paige had picked up at a discount store on the way here. This was merchandise. "Morning." I spun around. Paige was standing in the doorway of the guest room, wearing a silk robe that dragged on the floor. She looked tired, her eyes puffy, but she summoned a smile that was brittle enough to snap. "Where did this come from?" I asked, gesturing to the towels. "Oh, that?" she said, waving a hand dismissively. "Just some swag Grant brought. We thought it would be a nice touch for the girls. Like a spa day vibe. We are just borrowing it." "You are borrowing a neon sign that you drilled into my plaster?" I asked, pointing at the wall. "Command strips. Audrey, relax. It comes right off." I looked past her, out the sliding glass door to the deck. There was a large foldable backdrop set up, a step and repeat like they use at movie premieres, patterned with the same hexagon wave logo. "Paige," I said, my voice flat, "this isn't a girls' weekend. This is a pop-up shop." She laughed, but it was a dry, nervous sound. "You are so dramatic. It is just aesthetics. We are creating a moment. Can't you just let us have the moment?" I didn't answer. I walked past her, grabbed a coffee mug, one of the few of mine that hadn't been replaced by a branded tumbler, and went out to the front porch. The air was cold and damp. The Sprinter van was still blocking the driveway. I sat on the steps and pulled out my phone. I needed facts. I was done with arguments. I opened the email I had received 2 days ago. Saltline Key Management. I dialed the number in the signature block. It rang 4 times, then clicked over to a generic voicemail. "The subscriber you are trying to reach is not available." I frowned. A management company with a full generic voicemail? I looked at the bottom of the email again. There was a secondary number listed for emergency guest support. I dialed that one. This time, it didn't ring. It was answered immediately by an automated system, slick and professional. "Thank you for calling Saltline Coastal Experiences. If you are a current guest experiencing a lockout, press 1. If you are one of our partner hosts, press 2. I pressed 2. The line clicked, and a woman's voice answered. It wasn't a recording. "Saltline host support. This is Chloe. Can I have your property ID?" I froze. It sounded real. It sounded like a legitimate call center. "I am not a host," I said. "I am checking on a listing." "Oh, I am sorry," the woman said, her tone shifting seamlessly. "For booking inquiries, you need to go through the portal. We do not do direct bookings over the phone. Are you looking at the Driftwood Cove inventory?" She knew the location without me saying it. I hung up. My hands were shaking. This wasn't a scam Paige had invented in a weekend. This was infrastructure. I opened the browser on my phone and went to the Secretary of State's business search. I typed in Saltline Coastal Experiences. A result popped up immediately. Saltline Coastal Experiences, LLC, filing date, July 12th. Status, active. Principal address, 1400 Marina Drive. Suite 4B, registered agent, Grant P. Hemlock, Grant, the man with the clipboard. I clicked on the address. It looked official. Marina Drive was the commercial strip in the next town over, but when I switched to satellite view, the building at 1400 Marina Drive wasn't an office. It was a strip mall with a shipping center. Suite 4B was a mailbox rental. It was a shell company, a real LLC, legally filed, but operating out of a box, I heard a truck engine and looked up. Eli Mercer's white pickup was pulling up to the curb, parking carefully behind the massive black van. Eli got out. He looked tired, holding a thermos of coffee. He walked up the driveway, eyeing the branding on the side of the van. "Morning," he said, keeping his voice low. I stood up. "Thank you for coming back." "Eli," he nodded. "I didn't like how we left it yesterday, and I checked my records." He pulled a folded piece of paper from his jacket pocket. "I told you I got a request for a quote," he said. "Well, I went back and looked at the attachment. Usually, people just send a text saying, 'Call me.' But this one had a full file attached. Photos of the foundation, the windows, the doors." He handed me the paper. It was a color printout of a digital file. "This is the photo that worried me," he said. I looked at the image. It was a close-up of my front door. Specifically, the weather stripping at the bottom. I frowned. "What is wrong with it?" "Nothing is wrong with the door," Eli said. "But look at the date stamp in the corner of the file." I squinted. October 10th. That was Monday, the day I closed. I hadn't even arrived in town yet. I was still in the city, signing paperwork at the title company, but the photo wasn't from the real estate listing. In the photo, there was a small Amazon package sitting on the mat. I recognized it. It was the smart lock I had ordered to arrive on my first day. I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the sea breeze. Someone was here. I said, "On Monday, before I got here." Eli nodded grimly. And they took detailed photos, not just of the door, of the access points. The text asked about securing the perimeter for high-value assets. High-value assets. I looked at the house, my modest, 2-bedroom cottage. They are not talking about the house, are they? I asked. Eli took a sip of his coffee. "I do not think so. It feels specialized, like they were prepping a bank vault, not a vacation rental. And frankly, Audrey, the guy who sent this? I called the number back this morning. It is disconnected." I looked at the printout again. The meticulous documentation of my home's vulnerabilities. "Thank you." "Eli," I said, "can you do me a favor? Can you verify if there are any permits pulled for this address? For anything?" "I already checked," he said. "0, no permits. But there is a notice of intent for the seawall. Did your realtor tell you about that?" "No," I said. "That is a big deal. Audrey, if the seawall project goes through, you lose 6 feet of your backyard to an easement. It changes the property line. It might be why the seller sold so fast. I felt like the ground was dissolving under my feet. I will let you know," Eli said. He tipped his cap and walked back to his truck. I stood there for a moment, letting the anger crystallize. It was cold and hard and sharp. I walked back inside. The music had started again. Some acoustic playlist that was supposed to sound like morning coffee vibes. I found Paige in the kitchen. She was arranging croissants on a wooden board, tilting her phone to get the perfect angle. "Put the phone down. Paige." She didn't look up. "Just a sec. The lighting is perfect." I reached out and put my hand over her camera lens. "Hey," she snapped, pulling back. "We need to talk. Now. In the bedroom." Something in my voice must have registered, because she didn't argue. She set the phone down and followed me down the hall. I closed the bedroom door and locked it. I turned to face her. "I know about the LLC," I said. "I know about Grant, and I know someone was at this house on Monday taking photos of my locks." Paige's face went pale, then red. She crossed her arms, a classic defensive posture she had used since she was 6. "I do not know what you are talking about." "Stop it," I said. "I am done with the games. Did you steal my identity?" "What? No, that is insane." "Then how is my name on a contract I didn't sign? How is there an onboarding form submitted 3 months ago?" Paige looked at the floor. She picked at a loose thread on her robe. I just filled out a form," she mumbled. "You filled out a form as me?" "It wasn't identity theft," she insisted, looking up with tears in her eyes. "It was just streamlining. The platform required an owner profile. I knew you were buying the house. I just set it up early so we wouldn't miss the launch window. It is called being proactive. Audrey, you signed my name. I said, that is forgery. That is a felony. I didn't forge a signature. I just clicked a box. Everyone clicks boxes. It does not mean anything. She was hysterical now, pacing the small room. You are acting like I am a criminal, she cried. I am trying to help you. This contract? It pays $5,000 for the weekend. $5,000. I was going to give you half. That covers your mortgage for months. Why can't you see that? Because you sold my house without asking me, I shouted. I didn't sell it. I leveraged it. She stopped pacing and looked at me, her face crumbling into a look of pure, terrified victimhood. You are always judging me, she sobbed. You think I am just a mess. You think I am stupid. I finally put together a real deal, a real partnership with a brand, and you are tearing it apart because you have to be the one in control. You have to be the perfect big sister. I looked at her. I saw the manipulation, but I also saw the panic. She wasn't crying because I was mean. She was crying because she was trapped. Who is Graham? I asked quietly. She froze. The tears stopped instantly. I told you. He is a producer. Does he work for Saltline? He invests in things. Paige, I said, stepping closer. You are in trouble. This isn't just a brand deal. People do not scout locks for a seltzer commercial. What did you promise him? Nothing. Just access. Just the location. She pushed past me and unlocked the door. I'm going to get ready, she said, her voice shaking. We have a schedule. Just leave me alone. Audrey. She ran down the hall. I stood there, feeling the weight of her lies. She was drowning, and she was trying to use my house as a raft. I walked back out to the living room. The girls were awake now, milling around in matching pajamas. They looked harmless. They were laughing, scrolling on their phones, drinking coffee. One of them, a girl with dark curly hair named Tessa, was sitting alone on the edge of a beanbag chair. She looked uncomfortable. She wasn't recording anything. She looked up and saw me. She hesitated, then stood up and walked over. Hey, she said quietly. Audrey, right? Yes. Look, she said, glancing over her shoulder at the other girls. I just wanted to say, I am sorry about the vibe. I looked at her. She seemed genuine. What do you mean? I asked. Tessa lowered her voice. This weekend. It feels weird. Paige told us everything was cleared. She said she secured a luxury coastal venue for the content package. We all pitched in, you know? I stared at her. You pitched in? Yeah, $200 each. For the location fee, plus the sponsor stuff. My stomach dropped. Paige was charging her friends. Tessa shifted her weight, and I saw the photos Paige sent to the group chat before we came. She pulled out her phone. This is the place she showed us. She held up the screen. It was my living room. But it wasn't my living room. The walls were a different color. The floor was polished concrete, not wood. There was a fireplace that didn't exist. I realized with a sick jolt what I was looking at. It was the original real estate listing photo, but it had been heavily manipulated. Someone had used AI or Photoshop to completely remodel the interior digitally. That is not this house. I said, I know, Tessa said. We all thought, well, we thought maybe the renovation wasn't finished. But now that we are here, Audrey, are we trespassing? Because I cannot have a record. I am in nursing school. I looked at Tessa's worried face. She wasn't a villain. She was a customer. Paige had sold them a lie. 2, you are not trespassing, I said, choosing my words carefully. But you need to know that Paige does not have a contract with me. And those photos? They are fake. Tessa paled. Oh God. I knew it. She looked like she was about to cry. But I put a hand on her arm. Don't say anything yet, I said. Just keep your eyes open. I walked away, my mind racing. Paige had taken money from her friends. She had taken money from a sponsor, and she was funneling it all to... Who? Graham? Saltline? I went to the kitchen to pour more coffee. I opened the cabinet above the stove, looking for sugar. Taped to the inside of the cabinet door was a laminated sheet of paper. House rules. 44 Turn Lane. I stared at it. I had never written house rules. 1. No loud noise after 10 p.m. 2. Do not engage with neighbors. 3. Keep blinds closed on street-facing windows. 4. Scan for Wi-Fi and concierge. At the bottom was a QR code. I pulled out my phone and scanned it. It opened a web page. Saltline Stays, com/Driftwood 44. It was a booking page, a full professional listing for my house. The photos were the fake ones, the digital renovations. The description was flowery: exclusive private sanctuary, ultra-secure, discreet access. I scrolled down to the calendar. Every single date for the next 6 months was blocked out in gray. Unavailable, owner stay. It wasn't a rental listing. It was a dummy listing. It was set up to look booked, to look occupied, but never actually available to the public. Why would someone create a fake rental listing for a house they didn't own? Unless they needed to prove they controlled the property. I closed the cabinet door. My hand was trembling. I needed to call the bank. I went out to my car. It was the only place I could talk without being overheard. I dialed the fraud line for Coastal Heritage Bank, my fictional lender. I sat in the driver's seat, staring at the gray ocean while I waited on hold. Coastal Heritage Security, this is Marcus. Hi, I said. My name is Audrey Patterson. I just closed on a mortgage with you on Monday. I need to file an incident report. I believe my closing documents may have been compromised. Okay, Ms. Patterson, can you explain what is happening? I found a fraudulent rental listing for my home, and I found evidence that someone had my closing date and mortgage details before I even moved in. I see. Have you shared your closing disclosure or deed with anyone? No. I said, I haven't even unpacked the file. Think carefully. Marcus said, did anyone assist you with the paperwork? A notary? A family member? The memory hit me like a slap. 2 weeks ago, I was at my apartment in the city. The printer was broken. I was stressing about getting the proof of funds scanned for the underwriter. Paige had been there. She had stopped by for lunch. Let me do it. She had said, I have that scanner app on my phone. It is super fast. I will email them to you. I had let her. I had watched her take photos of my bank statements, my social security card, my driver's license, and the preliminary title report. She had emailed them to me, but she had them on her phone. I felt sick, physically sick. My sister, I whispered. My sister helped me scan the documents. Okay, Marcus said, his voice serious. We need to place a freeze on your title immediately. If they have your information, they could attempt title fraud or use the property as collateral for something else. I authorized the freeze. I hung up and leaned my head against the steering wheel. She had been planning this for weeks. She hadn't just crashed my weekend. She had targeted my closing. A tap on the window made me jump. It was Margot. I rolled down the window. Audrey? She asked. You look like you are about to be sick. I am fine. I lied. You are not fine, Margot said sharply. And neither is your sister. What do you mean? I was just walking the dog on the dunes path, Margot said, pointing toward the beach. About 20 minutes ago. I saw your sister. Paige? Yes, she was meeting someone. A man, not one of the boys from the van. What did he look like? Tall, older, maybe 50, wearing a gray suit, which is ridiculous for the beach. What were they doing? Arguing, Margot said. She was crying. He looked impatient, and then she gave him something. Gave him what? It was small, Margot said. She passed it to him, hand to hand. I thought it was drugs at first. You see that sometimes in the summer, but the sun caught it. It was silver, rectangular, a flash drive. I said, maybe, Margot said, or a key. But he put it in his pocket and walked away. He went toward the public lot. I thanked Margot and rolled up the window. A flash drive. Paige had scanned my documents. She had onboarded the house to an LLC. She had created a fake listing, and now she was handing off data to a man in a suit. This wasn't just about a party. The party was noise. It was cover, while the music blasted and the girls took selfies. Something else was happening. The house was being used as a drop point, or a verification point. I looked at the house. my sanctuary. It felt infected. I could call the police again. I could drag Paige out by her hair. But if I did that, the man in the suit would disappear. The LLC would vanish. And whatever debt Paige was drowning in would swallow her whole. I gripped the steering wheel. I wasn't going to kick them out. Not yet. I was going to wait. I was going to watch. And I was going to find out exactly what my sister had sold. I got out of the car and walked back toward the house. As I reached the porch, I saw the brand operations man, Grant, standing by the door. He was smoking a cigarette, watching me with hooded eyes. "Nice drive?" he asked. "Lovely," I said. He flicked the ash onto my porch. "We are going to be shooting the sunset sequence tonight," he said. "We will need the driveway clear." I looked at him. I saw the arrogance. He thought I was just the annoying sister. He thought I was powerless because I followed the rules. "No problem," I said. "I will make sure it is clear." Grant looked surprised. He had expected a fight. "Great," he said. I walked past him, into the house. I wasn't fighting for the driveway anymore. I was fighting for the truth, and I knew exactly where to start looking. I walked into the kitchen, where Paige was pouring mimosas, laughing too loudly. "Hey," she chirped. "Seeing me? You are back. Want a drink?" "No thanks," I said. I walked over to the counter and picked up my keys. "I am just going to do some work in the garage," I said. Paige's eyes flickered with relief. She thought she had won. She thought I was retreating. "Okay, have fun." I walked to the garage door. I knew something she didn't know. The garage wasn't just a garage. The previous owner had left a filing cabinet in the back corner, and inside that cabinet were the original blueprints for the house. If someone was scouting my access points, I needed to know exactly what they were looking for. I opened the door and stepped into the dark. I sat in a leather chair that smelled of dust and lemon polish, watching Nadine Kessler read the documents I had printed out at the library. Nadine was 60, sharp-featured, and wore a blazer that looked like it had been in a fight and won. Her office was a small storefront on the edge of town. Sandwiched between a bait shop and a bakery, she was the only real estate attorney in Driftwood Cove who didn't also work for the developers. She lowered the papers and looked at me over the rim of her glasses. "This is a mess." "Audrey," she said. Her voice was gravelly, the kind of voice that didn't sugarcoat bad news. "I know," I said, gripping my purse. "But is it a crime? My sister says she just clicked a box. She says it is just a misunderstanding." Nadine tapped a red fingernail on the printout of the location release form. "It is not a misunderstanding," she said. "It is fraud, but it is a specific kind of fraud that is very hard to untangle without blowing up your entire life. See this clause here?" She pointed to a block of dense text on the second page. "It says the signatory warrants they have apparent authority to grant access." She read, "In civil court." That is a murky phrase. If your sister had a key, or if she had access to your closing documents, which you told me she did, a judge might argue she acted as your agent, even without your actual signature. She created a contract that this company, Saltline, is relying on. "So I'm stuck?" I asked, feeling the blood drain from my face. "I have to let them film?" "No," Nadine said. "You can kick them out. You can call the sheriff and have them trespassed. But here's the problem. If you do that, Saltline will likely sue you for breach of contract and damages. They will claim they spent money relying on your sister's representation. You would win, eventually, but it would cost you $20,000 in legal fees and 6 months of your life." I stared at the diploma on the wall. $20,000. I didn't have $20,000. I had spent everything on the down payment and the repairs. "There is something else," Nadine said, her tone shifting. She opened a manila folder on her desk. "When you called me this morning, I pulled the title report for 44 Turn Lane, just to see what we were dealing with." She slid a document across the desk toward me. It was a map of my property, with a thick red line drawn through the backyard, cutting right across the dunes where the sea oats grew. "Did your realtor explain the easement to you?" she asked. "The what?" "The coastal access easement," Nadine said, "and the pending seawall review." I shook my head. No. The disclosure said the property was clear. Nadine sighed. A long, weary sound. Of course it did. The seller's agent was Seabright Realty, right? They are notorious for burying the lead. Audrey, there is a county notice filed 3 weeks ago. The town is planning to rebuild the seawall to protect the coastline from erosion. To do that, they are claiming a construction easement through your backyard. She traced the red line with her finger. They are going to park excavators on your dunes for 6 months. She said, and when they are done, the new seawall might cut off your private access to the beach. You will still own the land, but you won't be able to walk on it. I felt like I had been punched in the throat. My private access? I whispered. That was the whole reason I bought the house. That was the value. Exactly, Nadine said. That is why the house was on the market. The previous owners knew the notice was coming. They dumped the asset before the value tanked. If this easement goes through, your property value drops by maybe 30% overnight. I sat back, stunned. I was fighting a war on 2 fronts. Inside the house, my sister was selling me out to a seltzer brand. Outside the house, the county was coming to take my backyard. You need to document everything, Nadine said, leaning forward. Every conversation with your sister, every interaction with this Saltline group, and you need to find out who knew about this easement. Because if Saltline is a sophisticated operator, they would have done their due diligence. They would know about the seawall. And if they know, I asked, then they know the house is a bad long-term investment, Nadine said, which means they are not trying to be your partner. Audrey. They are trying to extract value quickly before the excavators show up. They are strip mining you. I walked out of Nadine's office into the bright, flat light of the afternoon, the town of Driftwood Cove, which had looked so charming 3 days ago, now looked like a trap. I got in my car and drove straight to the Seabright Realty office. It was a glass-fronted building near the marina, filled with photos of smiling agents and million-dollar views. I walked up to the reception desk. The woman behind it was young, with perfectly blow-dried hair and a headset. I need to speak to Jason Miller. I said, he was the listing agent for 44 Turn Lane. The receptionist's smile faltered. Oh, Jason? Yes. I closed on the house Monday. I have some questions about the disclosure. She bit her lip. Jason is actually no longer with the brokerage. He left on Tuesday. Tuesday, the day after I closed. Where did he go? I asked. He moved to Florida. She said, it was very sudden. Family emergency. I need to see the file. I said, leaning on the desk. I need to see the transaction file for my house, specifically the correspondence regarding the county easement notice. The receptionist typed something into her computer. She frowned. That is strange. What? The digital file is archived, she said, but the notes section is empty, and the physical file. She looked at a cabinet behind her. I think Jason took his active files with him to hand off. I can have the broker call you next week? Next week. I repeated, I'm sorry. She said, it is the weekend. Everyone is out at open houses. I walked out. I didn't scream. I didn't make a scene. I felt a cold, vibrating clarity. Jason Miller had dumped the house on me, hid the easement, and skipped town. And Saltline, the company that had onboarded my house 3 months ago, must have been watching the whole time. I sat in my car and pulled out my phone. I needed to check on the enemy within. I opened Instagram. Paige had been busy. Her story circle was a bright, pulsing ring around her profile picture. I tapped it. The first clip was a video of her and 3 friends toasting with the branded seltzer cans on my deck. The ocean was sparkling behind them. Best girls' trip ever. The caption read, so grateful for this sanctuary. I tapped to the next clip. It was a video of Paige sitting on one of the white beanbag chairs, looking somber. She was speaking directly to the camera. Real talk for a second. Guys, she said, her voice dropping to that hushed, confessional tone influencers use when they are manufacturing vulnerability. It is so hard when the people you love do not support your growth. I am trying to create something beautiful here, and I am dealing with so much negativity. Some people just want to control you because they are unhappy with themselves. She sighed. looking off camera with a brave, tragic expression. But we are not letting the bad vibes win. We are reclaiming this space for joy. Hashtag sister wounds, hashtag healing, hashtag saltline life. My jaw tightened. She wasn't just staying in my house. She was actively campaigning against me. She was framing me as the villain in her own hero's journey. Unsafe for women's fun. That was the subtext. I scrolled through the comments. Stay strong. Queen. Toxic family is the worst. Cut them off. You look amazing. Babe. Ignore the haters. She was weaponizing strangers against me. Then, a notification popped up at the top of my screen. A direct message request. It wasn't from a friend. It was from an account called saltline_ops_dear. I opened it. Ms. Patterson. The message read, "We have received reports of hostile behavior toward our production team and talent. Please be advised that your agreement with Saltline Coastal Experiences includes a non-interference clause. Continued disruption of the scheduled content capture will be considered a material breach. We reserve the right to pursue damages for lost production value, estimated at $15,000 per day. Please govern yourself accordingly." It was a threat, formal, cold, and expensive. I stared at the screen. $15,000 a day. They were trying to scare me into submission. They wanted me to hide in my bedroom while they stripped the value out of my home. But Nadine had said something important. If Saltline is a sophisticated operator... I looked at the message again. It was too formal, too stiff, and it was sent via Instagram DM, not email. A real legal department would have sent a cease and desist letter to my address or my lawyer. I decided to test the electric fence. I typed a reply. "Dear Operations Director, I am confused. I do not have a copy of the agreement you are referencing. My sister mentioned she handled the paperwork, but I never received the countersigned version. In order for me to comply with the non-interference clause, I need to see the specific language. Please email the full executed contract and the billing invoice to me immediately so I can review my obligations." I hit send. I waited. 5 minutes passed. The ocean wind rocked the car gently. Then, my email pinged. Subject: Executed Agreement. 44 Turn Lane. Attached was a PDF. I opened it. My heart was hammering, but my hands were steady. I scrolled to the bottom of the document. There it was. My name. Audrey M. Patterson. I stared at the letter M. My middle name is Elizabeth. My middle initial is E. I looked at the address typed under my name. 44 Turn Lane Way. Turn Lane Way. It was a clumsy, redundant typo. Lane and way. I closed my eyes, and a memory surfaced. 7 years ago. My 26th birthday. Paige had sent me a card. She had mailed it to my old apartment on Sycamore Street, but she had written Sycamore Street Boulevard on the envelope. The post office had delivered it, but I had teased her about it for weeks. I just wanted it to sound fancy. She had laughed. Paige didn't know the difference between a street suffix and a street name. To her, they were just words that made things sound official. Saltline hadn't forged this contract. Paige had. She had sat at a computer, probably the night she helped me scan my documents, and she had typed up this fake agreement. She had given herself a middle initial she thought I had, and she had fluffed up the address to make it look more substantial. The operations director wasn't a corporate lawyer. It was probably Paige, or Grant, or one of the other grifters sitting in my living room, typing on a phone. I drove back to the house. I wasn't going to storm in screaming. I was done with screaming. I parked on the street, leaving the driveway clear as ordered. I walked up the path. Tessa was waiting for me by the outdoor shower. She looked nervous, shifting from foot to foot in the sand. "Audrey," she whispered. I stopped. "What is it? Tessa?" She looked around to make sure no one was watching. I saw the group chat. She said, "Paige left her iPad open on the kitchen counter while she was changing. What did you see?" Tessa pulled her own phone out. I took a picture of the screen. She held it up. It was a photo of a text thread named The Launch Team. Paige: "She is freaking out. She knows about the LLC. Graham: "Keep her contained. We only need 24 hours. Paige. I can't keep stalling her. She is asking too many questions. When do I get the payout? I need to pay the guys. Graham. You get the wire when the content is uploaded. Stick to the script. Tell her it is a misunderstanding, and do not mention the seawall. Paige. What if she calls the cops? Graham. She won't. She is too soft. Just handle it. I am cleaning up the paperwork now. I stared at the name. Graham. He was the puppet master. He was the one pulling the strings. Do not mention the seawall. He knew. He knew about the easement. Where is Graham? I asked Tessa. I don't know, she said, but in the chat. He sent a location pin yesterday. For the gear drop-off. She scrolled back on the photo. There was a small map pin. The Hive Co-working, 1400 Marina Drive. The same address as the mailbox rental. I looked at Tessa. You are a good person. Tessa. I don't want to be part of a scam, she said, her voice trembling. Paige promised us this was legit. It is not. I said, go inside. Pack your bag. Be ready to leave tonight. I turned around and walked back to my car. I wasn't going to talk to Paige. I was going to the source. The Hive Co-working was in the strip mall I had looked up, right next to the shipping center. It was one of those generic, glass-walled spaces filled with freelancers and startups. I walked in. The air conditioning was freezing. A young guy at the front desk looked up from his laptop. Can I help you? I am looking for Saltline. I said, they have a desk here. Oh, yeah, Suite 4, in the back. I walked past rows of empty desks. In the back corner, there was a small glass office. The door was open. Grant, the man with the clipboard, was there. He wasn't wearing his brand operations black polo anymore. He was wearing a t-shirt. He was stuffing files into a cardboard box. 2 other men were dismantling a computer tower. They were packing up. I stepped into the doorway. Going somewhere? I asked. Grant looked up. His eyes narrowed. He didn't look like a high-powered producer now. He looked like a guy who had been caught skipping out on a lease. Ms. Patterson, he said, his voice smooth but guarded. We are just transitioning to a new HQ. I looked at the box. I saw a folder with my address on it. 44 Turn. I walked into the room. I know about the fake contract. I said, I know about the typo in the address, and I know Paige isn't the mastermind. She is just the face you are using to squat in my house. Grant stopped packing. He leaned against the desk, crossing his arms. Squat is an ugly word, he said. We prefer asset utilization. Look, Audrey, can I call you Audrey? You are taking this the wrong way. Your sister was in a bind. She owed some money to some people who don't take IOS. We offered her a way to work it off. We get a location for the brand launch. She gets a commission. You get to be a good sister. He smirked. It was a patronizing, slimy expression. You should be grateful. He added, we are generating passive income from a dead asset. A dead asset? I asked. Grant shrugged. Let's be honest. That house is a money pit. You overpaid. The market is cooling. We are just trying to help you monetize it before the reality sets in. I looked at him. He was confident. He thought he was the smartest guy in the room. He thought I was just a naive homeowner who didn't understand business. He didn't know I had seen the attorney. Does the passive income cover the easement? I asked quietly. Grant's face didn't change, but his eyes did. A tiny flicker, a blink. What easement? He asked. Too quickly. The construction easement. I said, for the seawall project, the one that starts next month. The one that is going to put excavators in the backyard and destroy the beach access for a year. I watched him process it. He didn't know. He had scouted the house. He had checked the locks. He had set up the shell company, but he hadn't pulled the county records. He had assumed the quick sale was just a desperate seller, not a property with a terminal diagnosis. The seawall? He repeated, his voice losing its smooth edge. That is, unconfirmed. It is confirmed. I said, I have the county notice, which means your luxury private beach location is about to be a construction zone, and your plan to flip it into a high-end rental is dead. Grant looked at the other 2 men. They had stopped taking apart the computer. They were looking at him. "You didn't tell us about a seawall." "Graham." One of them said, Graham, shot him a glare. "Shut up." I smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. "So that is it," I said. "You weren't just launching a seltzer brand. You were testing the property. You wanted to see if you could take it over. Maybe pressure me into a long-term management deal with your fake company, and then rent it out for $500 a night. But you didn't do your homework." Graham straightened up. He looked dangerous now. The corporate veneer was gone. "You need to leave," he said low. "I am leaving," I said. "But here's what is going to happen. You are going to call off your dogs. You are going to delete the fake listing, and you are going to get your people out of my house tonight." "Or what?" Graham stepped closer. "You going to call the cops? We have a contract. It might be messy, but it will hold up long enough for us to finish the weekend. Or I call the county," I said, "and I tell them that Saltline Coastal Experiences is operating a commercial business in a residential zone without a permit. At a property that is subject to an active environmental review. They love that. They will fine you $10,000 per day." Graham stared at me. He did the math. He realized the margins were gone. He picked up his phone. "Get the shot," he said into the receiver. "Get the sunset shot. Pack the gear. And get out. We are done." He looked at me. "Tell your sister she is short on the payment," he said. "She still owes me $2,000. I walked out of the office. My knees were shaking. But I didn't stop. I drove back toward Driftwood Cove. I understood now. Paige wasn't just being selfish. She had been recruited. Graham had found a desperate influencer with a sister who was buying a beach house. He had sold her a dream of easy money and brand partnership while he set up the infrastructure to hijack my property. But the easement, the thing that terrified me, had actually saved me. It made the house toxic to them. I pulled into my street. The sun was beginning to set, casting long, golden shadows across the dunes. The Sprinter van was still there. The music was still playing. But as I walked up the driveway, I saw something that stopped me cold. Paige was on the front porch. She wasn't filming. She was sitting on the steps, her head in her hands. Standing over her was the photographer, and he was yelling. "I said we need the light," he shouted. "Stop crying and get in the frame." I broke into a run. The sun was dying behind the heavy, slate-gray clouds, casting a bruised light over the driveway as I ran toward the porch. The wind had picked up, whipping the sea oats into a frenzy and sending gritty blasts of sand against the siding. The golden hour that the photographer had been screaming about was gone, replaced by the premature twilight of an approaching storm. I took the steps, 2 at a time. The photographer, a man with a ponytail and a lens that looked expensive enough to buy a used car, was standing over my sister. He was red-faced, his frustration boiling over into something nasty. "We are losing the light." "Paige!" he shouted, gesturing wildly at the darkening sky. "The client wants joy. They want carefree. You look like you are at a funeral. Fix your face or we are wrapping." Paige was sitting on the top step, her knees pulled to her chest. She wasn't fighting back. She was staring at the ground, her shoulders shaking. I stepped between them. "Get away from her," I said. The photographer spun around. "Who are you?" "Oh, right. The sister. Look, unless you can part the clouds, you are in the frame. Move. You are done," I said, my voice low and steady. "Pack your gear. Get off my porch." He scoffed, adjusting his camera strap. "We are not done until I have the deliverables. I have a shot list. You have nothing," I said. "I just came from the co-working space." I spoke to Graham. The name hit him like a physical blow. He froze, his arrogance evaporating instantly. He looked at me, then at Paige, then back at me. "Graham sent you?" he asked, his voice suddenly cautious. "Graham is packing up." I lied. "He said the shoot is scrubbed. He said to tell you to cut your losses and go." The photographer didn't ask for proof. He didn't argue. The mention of the name was enough. He looked at the sky, then at his equipment scattered on the lawn. "Fine," he muttered. "The light is trash anyway." He turned and started shouting orders to his assistant to break down the lights. I looked down at Paige. She hadn't moved. She was shivering. Even though it wasn't that cold yet. "Paige," I said, "get inside." She stood up slowly, her movements stiff and jerky, like a marionette with tangled strings. She didn't look at me. She walked past me, into the house, and straight toward the bathroom. I followed her. The living room was a disaster zone of tension. The 12 friends were clustered on the beanbag chairs, whispering. They looked less like party guests now, and more like refugees waiting for a bus that wasn't coming. They sensed the shift. The vibe had curdled. I walked to the bathroom door. It was locked. "Paige, open the door." I heard a sniffle. "Go away." "Audrey, please, just let me fix my makeup. I am not going away. Open the door or I take the hinges off. I know how to do it. I just installed the new deadbolt. Remember?" There was a long silence. Then, the lock clicked. I pushed the door open. Paige was sitting on the closed toilet lid. The room was lit by the harsh, clinical vanity bulbs. Her phone was in her hand, the screen glowing blue against her tear-streaked face. She wasn't fixing her makeup. She was scrolling. Her thumb moved in a rhythmic, compulsive twitch. Swipe, refresh, swipe, refresh. "What are you doing?" I asked, stepping inside and closing the door behind me. "I have to manage the comments," she whispered, her voice thick with congestion. "The engagement is dropping. Someone commented that the location looks gloomy. I have to delete it. If the algorithm sees negative sentiment, it suppresses the post. Paige, put the phone down." "I can't," she cried, looking up at me with wild, panicked eyes. "You don't understand. If I don't hit the engagement metrics, I don't get the second tier of the payout. I need the payout. Audrey." I reached out and gently took the phone from her hand. She resisted for a second, her fingers clutching the device like a lifeline. But then she let go. I set it on the counter. "Face down. There is no payout," I said. Paige blinked, a fresh tear tracking through her foundation. "What?" I sat on the edge of the bathtub, facing her. I forced my voice to be calm. I forced myself to look at her not as the enemy, but as my little sister who was bleeding out. I went to the office. "Paige, I saw Grant. I know his name is actually Graham. I know the contract is fake. I know about the typo in the address. And I know you forged my approval." Paige flinched with every sentence, shrinking smaller and smaller on the toilet seat. "I didn't mean to." She whimpered. "I know." I said, "But here's the reality. Graham is using you. He doesn't care about your brand. He doesn't care about your followers. He wanted the house. He wanted to use this weekend to establish a commercial precedent so he could take over the property." Paige shook her head. A frantic, denial-fueled motion. "No, no, we are partners. He believes in me. He said I have the perfect aesthetic for the coastal market. He is running a shell company out of a mailbox." Paige. "And he is fleeing because I told him about the seawall easement." "The seawall?" she asked, confused. "It doesn't matter," I said. "What matters is that you are in deep trouble. Not with me. With him." I leaned forward. "Why are you so scared of him?" "Paige, why did you tell him you would have the money tonight?" Paige looked at the floor. She picked at the hem of her linen jumpsuit. "I borrowed money," she whispered. "How much?" $12,000. I closed my eyes. $12,000. "Why?" I asked. "It was for the trip to Tulum," she said, her voice barely audible. "The one I posted last spring? I maxed out my cards, and I couldn't make the minimums. Graham knows people. He said he could front me the cash, and I could work it off." "Work it off how?" "By scouting." She said, "He said if I found premium locations, places that weren't on the market yet, places with owners who were manageable, he would knock $2,000 off the debt for every weekend I secured." I felt a coldness spread through my chest. "Manageable," I repeated. She nodded. "And you pitched me?" I asked. "You pitched your own sister as a mark?" "No," she cried, looking up. "Not a mark. As a partner. I thought it was perfect. You finally bought a house. You are always so stressed." "Audrey, You never use your vacation days. I thought I could set it up, manage it for you, and we would both win. I would pay off Graham, and you would get, I don't know, cool points? Money? She looked at me with a desperate, pleading sincerity. I honestly thought you would be okay with it, she said. Because you are, you know. I am what? You are soft, she said. The word hung in the air between us, heavy and suffocating. Soft. She didn't mean kind. She didn't mean generous. She meant pliable. She meant that I was a resource to be harvested because I never built fences. You always forgive me, she added, as if that explained everything. You are the responsible one. You clean things up. I figured, even if you were mad at first, you would fix it. You always fix it. I stared at her, for the first time in my life. I saw the dynamic clearly. It wasn't love, it was consumption. I was the host organism, and she was the parasite, and she was angry that I was finally twitching. I stood up. The gentleness was gone, replaced by a clarity that felt like ice water. I am not fixing this, I said. Paige looked alarmed. What do you mean? I mean, I am not paying your debt. I am not letting you film, and I'm not letting you stay. But, Graham, she stammered, he is expecting the footage. If I don't upload the reel tonight, the deal is void. He will call the loan. Then he calls the loan. I said, he will hurt me. Audrey, you don't understand. I understand perfectly. I said, you made a deal with a shark because you wanted to look rich on the internet. And now you want me to bleed to satisfy him. I walked to the door. Here is the offer. Paige. And this is the only offer you are getting. She stared at me, her eyes wide. You go out there, I said. You turn on your camera, and you tell your friends, and the sponsor, the truth. You admit that you do not have a contract. You admit that you took money from them for a rental you didn't control. You admit that this whole weekend is a fraud. I can't do that, she shrieked. It would kill my brand. I would lose all my followers. I ignored her. If you do that, I continued, I will drive you to the police station. I will help you file a report against Graham for predatory lending and extortion. I will give the police the evidence I found on the fake LLC. We will fight him the right way. Legally. I paused. But you have to stop filming. And everyone has to leave. Tonight, Paige looked at me with horror. It wasn't the horror of physical danger. It was the horror of social death. I was asking her to destroy the persona she had spent 5 years building. Audrey, please, she begged, standing up and grabbing my arm. Be reasonable. Just let us finish the weekend. We can fake the rest of the content inside. I will split the sponsor money with you. I will give you $3,000. Just let it happen. Please, don't make me look bad. She was bargaining. She was offering me bribes with money she didn't have, to avoid a consequence she deserved. I looked at her hand on my arm. Her nails were perfectly manicured, a soft shade of pink. I pulled my arm away. You have an hour, I said, to decide. I walked out of the bathroom. The house was darker now. The storm had fully arrived. Rain was lashing against the windows. Hard, rhythmic slaps that sounded like gravel being thrown at the glass. The wind was howling around the eaves, making the old wood frame of the cottage groan. The friends in the living room were looking at their phones, anxious. The Wi-Fi must have been flickering, because one girl was holding her device up in the air, trying to get a signal. Audrey? Tessa called out from the corner. She had her bag packed, sitting at her feet. Is everything okay? I didn't answer. I couldn't. I walked to the kitchen and stared out the window at the dunes. It was pitch black out there. The ocean was just a roaring void. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was Margot. I answered it immediately. Margot? Audrey. Margot's voice was sharp, cutting through the static of the bad reception. Are you expecting maintenance? No. Why? I am watching your side gate, she said. From my upstairs window, a man just walked through it. My stomach dropped. Was it the photographer coming back? What does he look like? I asked. He's wearing a raincoat, Margot said. Heavy set, bald. He is carrying a drill. A drill? And Audrey? He knows the code. He punched it into the keypad on the gate like he lives there. He knows the code because Paige gave it to Graham, and Graham gave it to his enforcer. Call the police, Margot. I said, call them now. I hung up. I looked at the kitchen door, the back door. It was glass. I turned to the living room. Everyone upstairs, I shouted. Now. The girls looked up, startled. What? Why? There is someone outside. I said, go to the bedrooms. Lock the doors. Panic ripples fast. They didn't ask questions. They saw the look on my face. They grabbed their bags and scrambled up the narrow staircase, a stampede of expensive loungewear. I stayed downstairs. I wasn't going to hide. This was my house. I checked the front door. Locked. Deadbolt engaged. I checked the back door. Locked. I pulled up the Ring camera app on my phone. The feed was blurry with rain. But I saw him. He was standing on the back porch. He wasn't trying to break in. He was drilling into the door frame. He was installing a lockbox. He was securing the asset. I felt a surge of rage so hot it burned my throat. They weren't just renting my house. They were repossessing it. I walked to the back door. I flipped the latch and threw it open. The wind ripped the door out of my hand, slamming it against the siding. Rain sprayed into the kitchen, soaking my shirt instantly. The man jumped. He was huge, a wall of muscle in a yellow slicker. He dropped the drill. He looked at me. He didn't look scared. He looked annoyed. Help you? He grunted. Get off my property! I screamed, the sound tearing out of my chest. He picked up the drill. He stood up slowly. He wiped rain from his face. Just doing a job. Lady, he said. Property management order. Installing the master key box. I am the owner, I yelled, stepping onto the wet deck. I didn't order anything. He smirked. It was a nasty, dismissive twisting of his lips. Paperwork says otherwise, he said. Salt line holds the master lease. Default clause triggered at 5 p.m. today. Payment wasn't received. He took a step toward me. You might want to go inside, he said. We are changing the access codes in 10 minutes. Wouldn't want you to get locked out. He was treating me like a squatter. He truly believed he had the right, or he didn't care. I held up my phone. The camera light was on. I am recording this, I said. I am streaming this directly to the police dispatcher. He hesitated. And I know who sent you. I said, my voice shaking but loud. Tell Graham that the easement notice voids his business plan. Tell him the county knows about the LLC. Tell him I know about the mortgage fraud. The man's eyes narrowed. You talk too much, he said. He stepped closer. He was close enough that I could smell stale tobacco and rain. Then he stopped. He looked at my phone. He looked at the camera light. He knew Graham was already running. He knew the photographer had bailed. He was just the cleanup crew. And he wasn't paid enough to catch a felony on a live stream. He chuckled, a low, rumbling sound. Coastal Heritage Bank, right? He asked. I froze. 4.5% interest, he recited. 30-year fixed, borrower, Audrey M. Patterson, cosigner, none. He recited my mortgage details, the private financial data that lived in a sealed PDF on my computer. He leaned in. You got a good rate, he said. Be a shame if you defaulted because of a legal dispute. He was threatening to destroy my credit, to tie the house up in so much litigation that the bank would foreclose. I stood my ground. I didn't step back. Get out. He stared at me for 3 seconds. Then he shrugged. Message delivered, he said. He bent down, picked up his drill, and picked up the heavy metal lockbox he had been trying to screw into my wall. He walked down the steps, into the rain. At the bottom of the stairs, he turned back. Tell Paige she is late, he shouted over the wind. And Graham charges late fees, daily. He disappeared around the side of the house. I stood there in the rain, soaked to the bone, shaking so hard my teeth chattered. I slammed the door and locked it. I engaged the deadbolt. Then I dragged the heavy kitchen island. It was on wheels, thank God, and shoved it against the door. I sank to the floor, leaning against the cabinets. I heard sirens in the distance. Finally, the kitchen was dark. lit only by the lightning flashing over the ocean. I heard footsteps on the stairs. It was Paige. She came down slowly. She was holding a towel. She looked like a ghost. "Is he gone?" she whispered. I nodded. She walked over to me. She tried to put the towel around my shoulders. I flinched away. "Do not touch me." Paige pulled her hand back. She stood there, looking helpless. "He knew my mortgage rate," I said, staring at the floor. "He knew my interest rate. He knew I didn't have a cosigner." Paige didn't answer. I looked up at her. "How did he know that?" "Paige?" She started to cry again. Silent, ugly tears. "I asked you how he knew that. I gave it to them," she whispered. "You gave them my mortgage statement?" "I had to," she sobbed. "Graham said he needed proof of ownership to legitimize the listing. He said if I could prove the house was real, he could advance me the money. So you sent him my closing file," I said, "the one I let you scan." "I didn't think they would use it," Paige cried. "I just thought it was paperwork. I blacked out your social security number. I tried to protect you. You gave a loan shark the deed to my house. I said, to pay for a trip to Tulum. I didn't mean to." "Stop saying you didn't mean to," I shouted. I stood up, water dripping from my clothes. "You did it. That is the only thing that matters. You looked at my life, the one thing I built for myself, and you saw a document you could trade." Paige wrapped her arms around herself. "I just wanted us to be partners," she whispered. I looked at her. I looked at the sister I had protected since we were kids. The sister I had bailed out of debt, bailed out of bad relationships, bailed out of loneliness. I realized then that she didn't see me as a person. She didn't see me as real, to her. I was just an NPC, a non-player character in the movie of her life. I was there to provide resources, to provide dialogue, and to fix the plot holes. My feelings didn't matter because, in her mind, I didn't really have any. I was just Audrey. I was just the infrastructure. I felt something break inside me. It wasn't a snap. It was a quiet, structural failure, like a beam giving way under too much weight. "The police are coming," I said. Paige looked up, hopeful. "To arrest the man? To take a report?" I said, "And I am going to give them everything. The text messages Tessa sent me, the fake contract, and your name." Paige's face went white. "You wouldn't. I am done. Paige, I am done being the soft one." Blue lights flashed through the front window, painting the walls in erratic bursts of color. The police had arrived. I walked toward the front door to let them in. "Audrey!" Paige screamed after me. "Audrey, wait!" I didn't wait. I unlocked the door and opened it to the storm. The blue lights that had flashed against the living room walls were not a rescue. They were a tease. I watched through the rain-streaked glass as the patrol car sped past my house, its siren wailing, disappearing down the coast road toward the marina where the storm surge was likely breaching the seawall. The dispatcher had been clear. "All units are responding to life safety calls. Expect delays." We were on our own. I turned back to the room. The house, which I had bought for its silence, was now vibrating with a frantic, claustrophobic energy. The power had flickered and died 10 minutes ago, leaving us in the gloom of battery-operated ring lights and cell phone flashlights. Shadows stretched long and jagged across the walls. The living room smelled of ozone and fear. Paige's 12 friends were huddled on the beanbag chairs, their expensive loungewear rumpled, clutching their bags. They were whispering, arguing in hissed tones about Uber availability and whether the causeway was flooded. Standing by the fireplace, his arms crossed, was Grant. He had come back in from the van when the rain started blowing sideways. He wasn't wearing his brand operations persona anymore. He was wearing the desperate, cornered aggression of a man who sees his profit margin dissolving. "You cannot kick them out in this weather," Grant said. His voice was loud, booming in the small room. "It is a liability issue. If one of these girls gets into an accident because you evicted them during a severe weather event, Saltline will sue you for negligence. We have a duty of care." He was using legal words like cudgels, trying to beat me back into submission. I looked at Paige. She was sitting on the floor near the kitchen island. her knees pulled to her chest. She was typing furiously on her phone, the screen illuminating her tear-streaked face. She wasn't looking at me. She was looking at her engagement metrics. Even now, with the roof groaning under the wind and a predator standing in her living room, she was worried about the algorithm. I realized then that if I didn't stop this, right now, the story would be written for me. Paige would post a tearful video about her cruel sister, who threw women into a hurricane. Grant would sue me for breach of contract. I would lose the house, my reputation, and my sanity. I needed to take the pen out of their hands. I walked to the bookshelf in the center of the room. I picked up a heavy ceramic vase and moved it to the floor. I took my phone out of my pocket, propped it up against a stack of books, and turned the camera to face the room. I hit record. Grant took a step forward. Put the phone away. Audrey, you do not have consent to record commercial operations. I ignored him. I didn't look at the lens. I looked at the women in the room. My name is Audrey Patterson. I said. My voice wasn't loud, but it was steady. It cut through the whispers and the wind. I am the sole owner of this property. The girls stopped talking. They looked up. I want to be very clear. I continued, keeping my eyes on Tessa, who was sitting near the front. I never signed a contract with Saltline Coastal Experiences. I never agreed to a brand launch. I never authorized a girls' weekend, a photo shoot, or a rental of any kind. Grant scoffed. A harsh, dismissive sound. She is emotional. He said to the room, she is having a breakdown. Paige, talk to your sister. I didn't flinch. This man, I said, pointing a steady finger at Grant, is claiming he has a signed agreement. He is claiming I am a partner host, but the document he is waving around is a forgery. I walked over to the coffee table where Grant had thrown his clipboard earlier. I picked it up. I held the contract up to the faint light of the battery lantern. I want you all to look at this, I said. I read from the bottom of the page. Signed, Audrey M. Patterson. I looked at Grant. My middle name is Elizabeth. I said, I do not have an M in my name. Grant's jaw tightened. A muscle feathered in his cheek. I looked back at the paper. Property address, 44 Turn Lane Way. I looked at Paige. There is no such street as Turn Lane Way. I said, it is just Turn Lane, but my sister has a habit of adding words to addresses to make them sound more expensive. She did it on my birthday card 7 years ago, and she did it on this contract. The room went deadly silent. The only sound was the rain hammering against the roof. Grant moved toward me. He was big, and he was angry. Give me the clipboard, he said. I didn't move. There is no signature, I said, raising my voice slightly to ensure the phone's microphone caught it. There is just a digital box that says, approved. This is a fake document created to defraud you, the sponsor, and me. I turned to the camera. I am inviting the representative from Saltline to deny this on the record. I said, right now, tell the camera you have a wet signature. Tell the camera you verified the deed. Grant stopped. He looked at the phone propped on the shelf. He looked at the red recording light. He knew that if he spoke, he was tying himself to a felony. He clamped his mouth shut. He looked like a trapped animal. The energy in the room shifted instantly. It went from a party gone wrong to a crime scene. The girls looked at Grant, then at Paige. They saw the fear in Grant's eyes. They saw the guilt in Paige's posture. Tessa stood up. She was holding her phone. Her hand was shaking, but she walked to the center of the room. She didn't speak to me. She spoke to the other girls. I have the group chat, Tessa said quietly. She swiped her screen and held it up. Paige told us she paid the location fee, Tessa said. She charged us $200 each. She said the money was going to the homeowner for a luxury cleaning fee. She looked at me. Did you get any money? Audrey? No, I said. Tessa scrolled down. And here, she said, 2 days ago. Paige texted, don't worry about the permit. Graham is handling the paperwork. We just have to be quick before my sister asks questions. Tessa looked at Paige. Who is Graham? She asked. Paige made a small, wounded noise. She looked up. her eyes swimming with tears. "It is complicated," Paige whispered. "You guys don't understand the pressure I'm under. We understand that you scammed us," another girl said from the back. Her voice was sharp. "You told us this was a sponsored trip. You told us we were getting brand ambassador credits. There is no brand." I said, "Saltline is a shell company operating out of a mailbox. They wanted the house. They used you as cover to get inside so they could change the locks and claim tenancy." The girls gasped. The realization hit them. They weren't influencers. They were squatters. They were props in a real estate heist. Grant had had enough. "This is slander," he snarled. "We are leaving. Paige, let's go." He reached for Paige's arm. Paige pulled back. She looked terrified. "I can't leave," she said. "My stuff is here." "You are coming," Grant said, his voice low and dangerous. "You still owe the balance." He grabbed her wrist. I stepped in. "Let her go." I said. Grant looked at me. He sneered. "Or what? You going to read me another typo?" "I am going to tell you about the police officer I spoke to 10 minutes ago." I lied. "The one who is sitting at the end of the block waiting for backup because I reported an unknown male drilling into my doorframe." Grant froze. "And I'm going to tell you that the lockbox your guy installed?" I said. "The police have it. They are dusting it for prints right now. It was a bluff. The police weren't there yet." But Grant didn't know that. He knew the lockbox man had failed. He knew the timeline was blown. He dropped Paige's wrist. "You are crazy," he spat. He looked around the room. He saw 12 phones raised, recording him. He saw the trap closing. He turned and walked to the front door. He threw it open, letting a gust of wind and rain blast into the room. "You will be hearing from legal," he shouted over the storm. He slammed the door and was gone. The silence that followed was heavy. Paige was sobbing now. Not the cute, single-tear crying she did for her stories. This was ugly. Heaving sobbing. She sat on the floor, rocking back and forth. "Audrey," she choked out, "I am so sorry. I didn't know. I swear I didn't know he was going to hurt you." She looked up at me, her mascara running down her face in black streaks. "I am the victim here," she wailed. "He tricked me. I am just a girl. I tried to do something nice and it all went wrong." She looked around the room at her friends, waiting for them to rush to her, to comfort her, to tell her it wasn't her fault. Nobody moved. Tessa stared at her with cold eyes. "You charged us." "Paige," Tessa said, "you took our money to pay off your loan shark." "I was going to pay you back," Paige cried. "Once the content went viral. I was doing it for us." She turned to me. She crawled a few inches across the floor, reaching for my hand. "Audrey, please," she begged. "You have to help me. He is going to come after me. I have nowhere to go. You have this big house. You have space. Just let me stay until I figure this out. I will be so good. I will cook. I will clean." She squeezed my hand. Her grip was tight. Desperate. "We are sisters," she whispered. "You always save me." I looked down at her. I remembered the years of bailing her out, the rent checks I wrote, the lies I told our parents to cover for her, the times I apologized to people she had hurt, just to keep the peace. I looked at her face, and I saw the calculation behind the tears. She was already planning the next phase. She was already figuring out how to spin this, how to make herself the tragic heroine who survived a scam. She wasn't sorry she did it. She was sorry she got caught. I pulled my hand away. I stepped back. "You don't get to use me," I said. The words weren't loud. They didn't echo. They just landed in the center of the room like a heavy stone dropping into a deep well. Paige froze. Her mouth opened slightly. "What? You don't get to use me," I repeated. "Not as a bank, not as a backdrop, and not as a safety net." I walked over to the shelf and picked up my phone. I stopped the recording. "You have to leave. Paige." "But it is storming," she shrieked. "I don't care," I said. I looked at the friends. "You can stay until the storm passes." I said to them, "You are victims in this. But Paige leaves now." Paige stood up. She looked at me with pure, unadulterated hatred, the The mask was gone entirely. "You are a bitch," she hissed. "You are a jealous, lonely bitch. I hope this house rots." She grabbed her purse. She didn't pack her bag. She didn't say goodbye to her friends. She walked to the front door and threw it open. Outside, the world was a chaos of wind and water. As Paige stepped onto the porch, blue and red lights flooded the driveway. This time, they didn't pass by. 2 police cruisers pulled up onto the grass, flanking the black Sprinter van. Doors opened. Officers in yellow slickers stepped out, their flashlights cutting through the rain. I walked to the door. Paige was standing on the steps, frozen. An officer walked up the path. He shone his light on Paige, then on me. "We got a call about an attempted break-in?" The officer shouted over the wind, "And a report of fraudulent contracting?" I stepped past Paige. "I am the homeowner," I said. The officer nodded. He looked at the driveway. "We found a lockbox down by the gate." He said, "Someone dropped it in the dunes. It was pried open." He held up an evidence bag. Inside was a black metal box and a piece of paper. "Found this inside," the officer said. "Looks like a list of addresses and a set of master codes." I looked at the list. I saw my address, and I saw 3 others on the same street. Graham, wasn't just targeting me. He was targeting the whole neighborhood. He was building a portfolio of stolen homes. "Is that your vehicle?" the officer asked, pointing at the van. "No," I said. "That belongs to the man who just left. Graham. He claimed to represent Saltline Coastal Experiences. We will put a bolo out," the officer said. "We need statements. From everyone." He looked at Paige. "Ma'am?" he said. "Are you involved in this?" Paige stood there. Her phone was in her hand. It was buzzing. I could see the screen lighting up with notifications, comments, likes, questions about why the live stream ended. She looked at the phone. She looked at the police officer. She had a choice. She could tell the truth. She could admit she was a pawn. She could tell them about the debt, the fake contract, the identity theft. She could be a person, or she could perform. She lifted the phone. She looked at the camera. Then, she lowered it. She pressed the side button. The screen went black. It was a tiny movement, but for Paige, it was a suicide. It was the end of the broadcast. "I don't know anything." She lied to the officer. "I was just a guest." The officer looked at me. I took a deep breath. Nadine had told me to document everything. She had told me to protect the asset. But the asset wasn't the house. The asset was my life. "She is my sister," I said, "and she is trespassing." The officer's eyebrows went up. "You want to press charges?" he asked. I looked at Paige. She looked small, wet, and incredibly ordinary without the filter of the screen. "I want her off my property," I said. The officer nodded. "Ma'am, you need to vacate the premises." Paige didn't argue. She didn't look at me. She walked down the steps, into the rain. She didn't go to the van. She walked past the police cars, down the driveway, and sat on the bottom step of the porch, just outside the shelter of the overhang. She sat there in the downpour, her expensive linen jumpsuit clinging to her skin, her phone dark in her lap. She sat there like a child in timeout, waiting for someone to come and tell her it was okay, waiting for me to come with a towel and an apology. I watched her for a minute. The rain was washing the Driftwood Cove sand off the driveway. I turned around. I walked back inside my house. I closed the door. I locked the deadbolt. The sound of the latch clicking into place was the loudest thing I had ever heard. The house was quiet. The friends were silent. The storm raged on outside. But inside, for the first time since I turned the key 3 days ago, there was peace. Thank you for listening to this story. I hope you enjoyed this journey into the dark side of family dynamics and the fight for boundaries. It is a reminder that sometimes the hardest people to evict are the ones we share DNA with. I would love to hear from you. Where are you listening from today? Have you ever had to set a peace rule with a family member? Do you think Audrey made the right choice in the end? Please leave your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story and want more realistic, emotional dramas, please subscribe to Revenge Stories. Until next time, protect your peace.